I want you to travel back in time with me for a second.
Oh, okay. Let's do it.
Just think back to a language class you took, maybe 10 years ago. Picture the room.
Yeah, the classic classroom setup.
Right. Now, do you actually remember the grammar lists you had to study?
I definitely do not.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Those long, just endless columns of irregular verbs and vocabulary words written on a chalkboard or printed in tiny text in a really heavy textbook.
Yeah, if you're like most people, your mind is probably completely blank right now. I mean, you might remember the feeling of sitting in the classroom, sure.
The boredom.
Right, the boredom. But those specific lists are gone, just deleted.
Totally blank. And that is because staring at those lists was incredibly boring. But now, I want you to contrast that with something else. Think about a classic movie from your childhood.
Okay.
Let's take an animated classic, like The Lion King.
Oh, great example.
Even if you haven't watched it in a decade, I bet you remember the main characters.
You remember the songs, definitely.
Yes. You probably even remember the sad parts perfectly and, exactly how they made you feel. That story simply sticks in your brain.
It really does.
And today, we are doing a deep dive into why that happens. And more importantly, how you can use that exact same phenomenon to learn English, or honestly, any language, dramatically faster, like 10 times faster.
It's such a fascinating premise to explore. We're looking at a method built entirely around storytelling.
Yeah.
And it addresses the core tension in how we traditionally try to learn versus how our brains actually retain information. Because in school, we force ourselves to memorize isolated facts.
It was painful.
Very, but our brains are fundamentally wired to hold on to narratives. It's not magic, it's just science.
Okay, let's unpack this. Why does the brain aggressively reject a tidy list of vocabulary facts, but then it effortlessly holds onto the plot of a cartoon from our childhood? Like, why is human memory so incredibly picky?
Well, it comes down to how your brain prioritizes information to prevent overload. I mean, every second of the day, you are bombarded with data.
So much data.
Exactly. So your brain has to filter what is actually important and what is just garbage. When you read a list of vocabulary words, your brain's memory centers, specifically the hippocampus, they tag that information as low priority data.
Yeah, that doesn't mean anything to you.
Right, it has no emotional weight. There are no stakes. To the brain, it's just random noise. It's like seeing the license plate of a car passing by on the street.
Right, there's absolutely no reason to keep it.
Exactly, but when you introduce a narrative, everything changes. A story provides emotion, it provides sequence and consequence.
Yeah.
When you're invested in a story, your amygdala, which is the emotional center of the brain, it lights up. It basically tells your memory centers, hey, pay attention.
This is important.
Yes. It says, this involves human struggle or survival or social cues. We need to keep this.
I love that. I mean, memorizing a list of words, it's kind of like trying to memorize a pile of loose puzzle pieces.
Oh, that's a good way to look at it.
You're just staring at random disconnected shapes. You might force yourself to remember one or two, but it's exhausting. But a story is the picture on the front of the puzzle box.
Right.
It shows you how all those pieces actually interlock. Once you see how the edges of a new word connect to a character or a situation, your brain just snaps the pieces together.
That is an excellent analogy. And what's fascinating here is how that leads perfectly into how we actually absorb vocabulary in the real world.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Let's break down the difference between encountering a word in a textbook versus encountering it in a story. In a textbook, you're presented with a direct translation. You see the word excited, and right next to it, the definition reads, very happy.
And then you just sit there and repeat that equation. Excited equals very happy. Excited equals very happy.
Just over and over.
You just stare at the puzzle piece until your eyes get heavy.
But in a story, you don't just get a flat definition, you get a vivid situation. You read about a character, let's say a young woman who has been struggling to pay her rent. And she is jumping up and down in her apartment, shouting, calling her mother on the phone because she just won the lottery.
Oh, well.
Right. In that context, you don't just read the word excited, you understand its energy.
You literally feel her heart rate jumping. The word suddenly has a natural home. Actually, memorizing floating words from a list is like looking at animals in a cage.
Oh, I see.
But putting them in a sari gives those words a natural home where you can watch how they behave. And there is a massive practical benefit to this natural environment, too.
Because of repetition.
Yes. If the author is writing about this highly excitable character, they're going to use that word and variations of it multiple times throughout the chapter.
Which introduces natural spaced repetition.
Exactly. You don't have to build a giant stack of flashcards and, schedule when to review the word excited to force it into your long-term memory.
The author does the heavy lifting for you.
They really do. They repeat the vocabulary in a meaningful context completely naturally.
And because you're focused on the plot, because you actually want to know what she's going to do with the lottery money, your brain stays open.
You aren't stressed about studying.
Right. You absorb the repetition without the stress of formal studying. When learning is fun, the learning actually feels invisible.
Okay, so stories are the picture on the puzzle box. The science makes total sense. But practically speaking, for you, the listener, what kind of stories should you actually be looking for?
That's the big question.
Because I'm guessing that if you are learning English, grabbing a massive complex novel by Charles Dickens isn't the smartest first move.
It would be a terrible first move, honestly.
Yeah.
If the material is too difficult, you'll experience severe cognitive overload. You will spend so much time just struggling to decode the grammar that the narrative arc will be completely lost.
You won't even know what's happening in the story.
Exactly. The frustration will entirely outweigh the neurological benefits of the story. You have to start small.
Start small.
Yes, with materials that offer a very low barrier to entry.
And there's actually a really clear reading menu for beginners that we can pull from our sources today. If fables and massive novels are at opposite ends of the spectrum, you want to start right at the foundation.
Right.
So let's look at fables and fairy tales first.
Think of classic stories like The Tortoise and the Hare, the slow turtle and the fast rabbit.
Why do these work so incredibly well for language learners? Because these stories were originally designed to be told aloud around fires and understood by children.
The language is deliberately simple, but more importantly, the narrative arc is highly predictable.
Predictability is key.
Predictability is your best friend when learning a language, because you already intuitively know that the arrogant rabbit is going to lose and the steady turtle is going to win.
Right, we all know the ending.
So your brain uses that familiar plot framework to easily decode any new words you encounter along the way.
That is so smart. You're leveraging what you already know to figure out what you don't know. But, what if you are an adult learner and you find reading children's fairy tales a bit too childish? That brings us to the second item on the menu, a tool that is honestly a game changer: graded readers.
Yes, graded readers are essentially a secret weapon for language learner.
They really are.
These are books written specifically for people who are learning a new language.
Right. They take great engaging plots. Sometimes they're original thrillers or mysteries, and sometimes they're famous classics, and the authors rewrite them using controlled, easy vocabulary.
And the brilliance of it is that they are organized by levels.
Yes.
You can start at level 1, where the sentence structures are very basic, and then once that feels comfortable, you move up to level 2, then level 3.
You get all the suspense of a real novel without the headache of looking up every single word.
We really cannot overstate the psychological win here. Finishing an entire book in a foreign language provides an immense feeling of accomplishment.
It feels amazing.
It builds momentum and motivation that no grammar worksheet can ever match.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But let's say fiction just really isn't your thing. You want to learn about the real world.
Sure.
That requires a different kind of reading, which leads to the third suggestion on our menu: using daily news stories. Now, I have to pause and push back on this one.
Okay, go ahead.
Wait, isn't the daily news usually full of complex political jargon, economic analysis, and really dense, stressful vocabulary? That sounds like a nightmare for a beginner.
That is a very valid concern, and it's crucial to clarify the exact parameter of what kind of news we are talking about here.
Okay.
We are not talking about reading a 5-page geopolitical analysis in a major newspaper. The key to using the news for language learning is to seek out short reports on highly specific, accessible topics.
Like what? What's a safe topic that won't completely overwhelm a learner?
Technology and animals are prime examples.
Oh, animals.
Right. Imagine a short, maybe 3-paragraph news story about a local zoo rescuing a baby elephant, or a brief update on a new smartphone being released.
Oh, I see. A story about a baby elephant rescue is going to use very foundational action verbs: run, hide, save, help, feed.
Precisely. These articles are brief, they use modern, everyday vocabulary, and they keep you connected to the real world without burying you in complex academic language.
Okay, so our beginner reading menu is actually highly actionable. We have 3 great options: fables for simple, predictable plots, graded readers for leveled, engaging fiction, and short, specific daily news stories about accessible topics.
It's a solid menu.
But having the right reading material in your hand is only half the battle, right?
It is. You cannot just stare at the page passively and expect to magically learn a language faster. You have to actively engage with the material to build those neurological pathways.
We need a bridge between just looking at words and actually improving our speaking and listening fluency. And our sources detail 3 essential steps to do exactly that.
These steps are crucial.
Let's walk through how to actually execute this storytelling method. What is the first step?
The first step is to build the visual audio bridge through active listening.
Active listening.
Right. The goal here is to listen to the story out loud using an audiobook, a podcast, or a text-to-speech app while you are simultaneously reading the text on the page.
This is critical, especially for a language like English, where the spelling of a word and the sound of a word often seem to be playing a practical joke on the learner.
It's so true.
Think about words like though, through, and tough. They look almost identical, but they sound completely different.
English spelling is notoriously chaotic. By reading and listening at the exact same time, you are explicitly connecting the auditory input to the visual input.
You're linking them up.
Yes, you are preventing a very common scenario where a learner knows a word perfectly on paper, but completely fails to recognize it when a native speaker says it out loud.
You're syncing up your eyes and your ears.
No.
Okay, so you are listening and reading along. The second step tackles a major hurdle. It's dealing with the dictionary trap.
Oh, the dictionary trap.
When you are reading and you hit a brand new word, what is your immediate instinct? For most of us, we pause the audio, put the book down, pick up our phone, and open a translation app.
Which completely shatters the immersion of the narrative. You've just pulled yourself out of the story and put yourself back into a sterile, fact memorization environment.
Exactly. Here's where it gets really interesting. This step says, stop. Do not reach for the dictionary. Instead, try to play a guessing game.
The guessing game.
Right. Try to guess the meaning of the unknown word from the context of the story first. It transforms reading from a passive, boring chore into an active puzzle for the brain.
You basically become a detective. You look at the clues surrounding the mystery word.
Let's play this out. Say the sentences, the man was so thirsty he drank the entire goblet of water.
Oh.
Now, you might have no idea what a goblet is, but look at the clues. You know the man is thirsty. You know water is involved. You know he is drinking.
So your brain can easily deduce that a goblet must be some kind of cup or glass. And here is why this cognitive struggle is so incredibly valuable. When you finally do check the dictionary at the end of the chapter to confirm your guess, that word is going to stick in your long-term memory far better than if you had just looked it up immediately.
Because you had to work for it. You invested mental energy into solving the puzzle. The brain remembers the effort.
It tags the information as valuable because of the cognitive resources you spent retrieving it. Which brings us to the third and honestly, arguably the most crucial step in the entire process.
Step 3.
This is the production phase. Retelling.
Here is how it works. After you finish the short story or the chapter, you close the book, you turn off the audio, and you try to retell the core of the story to yourself out loud, using just 3 or 4 simple sentences.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this is the bridge that moves a learner from just consuming language to actually producing it. If you read a graded reader about a boy and a dog, your retelling does not need to be a complex 20-minute monologue.
No, keep it simple.
It can literally be, the boy found a dog, the dog was lost, they became best friends.
Now, I have to play devil's advocate here for a second.
Sure.
Isn't there a massive danger in doing this alone? If I'm standing in front of my mirror, retelling the story out loud, and my grammar is absolutely terrible, aren't I just cementing bad habits? Shouldn't a teacher be there correcting every single mistake?
That is a very common fear, but it misunderstands the goal of this specific exercise. We are distinguishing between practicing for accuracy and practicing for fluency.
Okay, what's the difference?
Well, when you're taking a grammar test, accuracy is everything. But when you are trying to become comfortable speaking a language, the biggest hurdle is usually mental paralysis.
Oh, I know that feeling where you know the vocabulary, but your mouth just freezes.
Exactly. Because reading is passive recognition. Speaking is active recall. When you force yourself to summarize the story out loud, you are training your brain to retrieve vocabulary and grammar structures on demand without the safety net of the text. If you stop to obsess over whether you use the perfect past tense verb, you trigger that mental paralysis all over again. The goal of retelling is flow. It is getting the mouth moving. It doesn't have to be perfect English, it just has to be your English.
You are building the physical and mental habit of producing the language rather than just consuming it. That makes a lot of sense. You're moving away from treating language like a math test you have to pass and treating it instead as a tool you use to share a narrative.
And we can see the power of this shift in mindset when we look at practical applications of this method.
Let's talk about that.
Consider a learner who decides to apply this not just to books, but to visual media.
Yes, let's talk about the success story of David from our source material. David's approach was remarkably straightforward, and honestly, it sounds kind of fun.
It does.
He didn't lock himself in a room with a stack of textbooks for 4 hours a day. Instead, he utilized the storytelling method using a television show.
He watched just one episode of a sitcom every single day.
That's maybe 20 minutes of his time. And sitcoms are brilliant for this because they are basically short, funny, highly predictable stories about everyday life.
Exactly.
So David watched his episode, engaging with the visual context and the spoken audio. And then he religiously practiced that crucial third step. He turned off the TV and he practiced retelling the story of that specific episode out loud.
He would say something like, "Today, the main character lost his keys. He was late for work. His boss was angry."
Just simple active recall.
Yeah.
And the results speak volumes about why this method is so heavily promoted. In just 3 months of doing this short daily practice, his speaking confidence absolutely exploded.
3 months is an incredibly rapid timeline for language acquisition.
It really is.
It highlights that progress isn't necessarily about studying harder, but studying smarter by aligning with how the brain naturally processes information.
Yeah.
The low barrier to entry, just 20 minutes of a TV show, meant he could build a consistent daily habit without burning out. And the high emotional engagement of a comedy kept his brain receptive to the new vocabulary.
That perfectly sets up a direct challenge for you, the listener. Think about what this means for your own daily routine. You can start this today. Your challenge for this week is to put these 3 steps into practice.
Find a short story online. It could be a simple fable, a chapter from a graded reader, or a short news story about a local animal rescue.
Pick something fun.
Right. Choose a topic that genuinely interests you, because without that baseline curiosity, the method loses its power.
Then read it. Apply step 1. Listen to it out loud while reading to build that visual audio bridge.
Sync it up.
Yep. Apply step 2. Play the detective guessing game with any new words before you touch a dictionary. And most importantly, apply step 3. Stand in front of your mirror or sit in your car and tell the story back to yourself out loud in 3 or 4 simple sentences.
Embrace the imperfection. Just focus on the flow of the narrative.
So what does this all mean? When we look at all these concepts together, the overarching message is one of massive empowerment.
It really is.
It means you do not have to suffer through boring rote memorization to achieve fluency. If flashcards don't work for you, it doesn't mean you are bad at learning languages.
Not at all.
It just means you need to take those words out of their isolated little cages and let them run wild in a vibrant, living ecosystem of a story.
It entirely changes the emotional landscape of learning.
Yeah.
You transition from feeling constantly tested and inadequate to feeling entertained, engaged, and capable.
Absolutely.
But exploring the power of narrative like this raises an important question. Something to mull over as you go about your day.
Oh, I like where this is heading. What is it?
Well, we have just spent all this time examining how actively retelling simple, engaging stories can completely skyrocket your memory and confidence in a new language in just a few months.
Right.
We know the human brain is desperate to process the world through active storytelling. It is literally how we make sense of reality.
Right. It's our brain's default operating system.
So consider your own daily habits. How much of your native language, how much of your own memory, your own daily life experiences are you letting slip away simply because you are passively consuming content?
Oh, wow.
We spend hours staring at screens, endlessly scrolling through fragmented pieces of information, never taking the time to actively interact with or retell the stories we are consuming.
Wow. If we don't actively tell the story back, do we even really remember it?
Exactly.
Are we just letting our own lives become a blur of disconnected puzzle pieces? That is a brilliant and heavy thought to leave on. Remember, your brain doesn't want the raw data. It wants the Lion King.
Give it the story.
Give it the story. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive today. Keep reading, keep listening, and keep telling your story.